So we are continuing on with Chapter 4. We're now in Section 3. And the title of this section is Biomes. And again, if you remember, this is a vocabulary word that we learned in our last chapter, or Chapter 3, that focused on ecology. And so now we have an entire section within communities and ecosystems that focuses on what are known as biomes. And just as a refresher to remind us what a biome is, we'll give a quick definition here. It says a biome is a complex of terrestrial communities that covers a large area and is characterized by certain soil and climate conditions and particular assemblages of plants and animals. Now that sounds like a long, confusing definition, but if you break it down, a complex is just almost like a web, kind of like a bunch of interconnecting things, and terrestrial just simply means land, so it's just a lot of different land communities that covers a large area, so that makes sense, and it's characterized by certain soil and climate conditions. And so those soil and climate, and again, remember, as being like the average year-to-year of precipitation and temperature, and then certain soil conditions. We have a lot of farmers around here, so they obviously know what soil conditions are. And then particular assemblages, remember that's just a fancy way to say groups, so different groups of plants and animals. So that's what a biome is. And variations in our plants and animals will help different species survive under different conditions and different biomes. So all these, obviously our entire Earth is not the exact same everywhere, so different parts of our Earth are going to have different biomes, and then therefore is going to have different plants and animals. And our plants and animals will exhibit variations in tolerance, or the ability to survive and reproduce under conditions that differ from their optimal conditions. So each animal can only display a certain amount of tolerance towards certain things. So therefore, if there's an animal that has a low tolerance to cold, meaning that if it's really cold temperatures they won't survive, then obviously we're not going to find them up in Antarctica or up in Canada. We're going to find them around the equator where it's warm. So that's what tolerance is their ability to kind of reproduce and survive under certain conditions. And then the climate of a region is a very important factor in determining which organisms can survive where. And so that's kind of just going off what I just said, that you have to have a certain climate for certain organisms to survive. And within the biome, temperature and precipitation can vary over small distances. So even though we are within one biome, the temperature and precipitation can be different in two areas of the same biome. And the climate in that small area that differs from the climate around it is called a microclimate. So micro just meaning little. So that there could be just like, okay, again, if we'll just give an example of in Illinois, if we had one area that was warm all year round. That obviously isn't true, but just using as an example. If we had one area that never got any snow, that was always sunny, always warm, that would be our microclimate compared to our regular Illinois, because right now it's obviously pretty cold outside and not too pleasant to be out. So that's what a microclimate is. And kind of another way we can look at climate is looking at something that's called a climate diagram, and this will show us how much temperature and precipitation that we have in a certain area. So this just again shows our average temperature and our average precipitation throughout each month and things like that. So that's one way to illustrate our climates in our different areas. And so that is kind of all just again the background information to actually get us in to what our major biomes are. So we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 major biomes. We have what's known as a tropical rainforest, tropical dry forest, tropical savanna, a desert, a temperate grassland, temperate woodland and shrubland, a temperate forest, northwest coniferous forest, boreal forest, and the tundra. So all of these are going to be different biomes, meaning they're all going to have different climates, which is why we focus so much on that at the beginning in that whole first section. And so now we're just going to look at what are the major characteristics of the world's biomes. And biomes are defined by their unique set of abiotic factors, particularly climate, and a characteristic assemblage of plants and animals. So it's saying that the reason biomes are set apart from one another is by their climate and their different groups of plants and animals. It's what's going to make a biome unique. And here's kind of a world map of all of our different biomes, and we will get into this more in depth whenever we actually talk about our specific biomes, which we're going to start with first off here, our tropical rainforest. So tropical rainforest is our first biome, and this biome is home to more species than all the other biomes combined. So this is our most biologically diverse biome. It has the most life of all the other biomes put together. And then some kind of important vocabulary to help us understand why there's so many species in these biomes is that the tops of all tall trees extending from 50 to 80 meters above the forest floor, they form a dense covering called the canopy. So the canopy is one area of the tropical rainforest, and there is a whole set of species that live just in this canopy. And then another part of the tropical rainforest is that in the shade below the canopy there's a second layer of shorter trees and vines, and they form an understory. And in this understory there is a completely different group of plants and animals that lives there. And so that's one reason why there's so much life there in the tropical rainforest. And then organic matter that falls to the forest floor quickly decomposes and the nutrients are recycled. So there's not very fertile soil in the tropical rainforest, because the reason why we have fertile soil is because when something dies, it breaks down and its nutrients stay in the soil. When something dies in the rainforest, it decomposes, the nutrients are in the soil for a very quick period of time before either something else comes along and eats them or a plant takes them up and uses them. So there's not a lot of time for to have fertile soil in the rainforest. And so some abiotic factors that are found in the rainforest: it is hot and wet all the year round, and there's thin, nutrient-poor soil. So again, I just said that. So it's very hot and it's always raining in the tropical rainforest. That kind of makes sense there. And then there's dominant plants would be broadleaf evergreen trees, there's ferns, and there's large woody vines and climbing plants. So that would be some of the plants that you saw. And the dominant wildlife, there's things called sloths, there's capybaras, jaguars, anteaters, monkeys, toucans, parrots, butterflies, beetles, piranhas, caimans, which are similar to crocodiles, boa constrictors, and anacondas. So we'll try to take a look at some of these animals in class so you can actually get a first-hand look at them. And the parts of the world that you would find them would be South and Central America, Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, India, and northern and northeastern Australia. So that's where you're going to find our tropical rainforest. So the next biome, the last one for today, is called the tropical dry forest, and they grow in places where rainfall is highly seasonal rather than year-round. And during the dry season, nearly all the trees will drop their leaves to conserve water, so that's kind of like how it is around here. And a tree that sheds its leaves during a particular season is each year is called a deciduous tree. So most of the trees we have here in Illinois are also deciduous as well, because the leaves turn colors and then they fall off. And so some abiotic factors that make up this part of the world is it's generally warm all year round. They have alternating wet and dry seasons, and they have rich soils actually that kind of are subject to having erosion occur, so being washed away. And so our dominant plants would be tall deciduous trees, drought-tolerant plants, and then aloe is actually, so aloe vera if you ever have a burn, because that plant that grows naturally. And some of the wildlife would be tigers, monkeys, elephants, rhinoceroses, something called a hog deer, great pied hornbills, pied harriers, those are both birds, pelicans, termites, snakes, and monitor lizards. And this could be found in parts of Africa, South and Central America, Mexico, India, Australia, and the tropical islands. And so we'll talk about those more in depth in class and actually get a look at some of these animals. So that's it for the first section of biomes. Let me know if you have any questions.